Hello everyone, Marcus here, and this is your VR news for November 21st. As with last week, the primary source for the VR news this week is the website road2vr.com. Yes, that's right, that is road2vr.com. They are probably the best website out there in order to get your daily fix for virtual reality news. Trust me guys, I've checked them out every single day, and they always provide something, at the very least, that I can check out, and I don't really know of any other websites, so if you do know of any others and you want me to check them out, hit me down below in the comment section and I will investigate. Now then, let's head on over and check out the articles. The first little article here is about a company called JauntVR and the demos they have created. For those of you that don't know what JauntVR is, they are a VR cinema company who is trying to explore virtual reality's possibilities within the realm of creating cinematic experiences like that which we experience at movies or some other artistic medium. So they are trying to explore this and demoing it using 3 demos. As we can see here, one of the demos here is a World War II themed item called The Mission. Another one is Kaiju Fury, which is based on giant monsters, and another one is Black Mass, which is a horror film. Honestly guys, this is one of the areas where I think VR could probably use a little bit more expansion, because VR is a very versatile medium, guys. It's kind of been confusing because a lot of the times when people think VR, they also like to think gaming. And here's the thing guys, no matter what we like to think of it, gaming, in my opinion, or at the very least the idea of video game, is both an artistic medium in some respects, whenever, depending on how you're referring to it, but also a commodity. And in terms of its commodity, I think it's a horrible naming structure. Pardon that this is kind of my own little rant here, guys, but with games, they have 2 names in some respects. There is video game as a commodity and video game as an art medium. And in terms of games as a medium, I perfectly believe they are artistic in every nature, but as a commodity or a product, I think video game is a terrible name in certain respects, and is really just a product of the platform it was placed upon during a time when platforms were basically forced to be specialized due to limited resources. Why was Atari 2600 a console or a gaming console? Because really it didn't have much more processing power to do anything else, and they might as well market it towards a specific niche so people know if I bought this 2600, it will play games. Likewise, as we continued on to the 8-bit era with the NES, and then 16-bit and the 32-bit. But the thing is, as we continue to progress technologically, guys, the necessity of having a dedicated processor, something dedicated just for one person, or one purpose, has steadily been melting away. You can check out the modern day PS4 and Xbox One. Those devices have just tons and tons of functionality to the point that they're basically just less versatile versions of PCs with some more standardized hardware. Oftentimes you'll hear the PC Master Race bantering on about the whole idea that we have so much more versatility, and while admittedly I believe that consoles have their own place in the market, at the same time, in terms of processing power and what they all are, every single one of these things we like to separate in terms of what they are between consoles, tablets, computers, PC, cell phones. In the truth, they're all just computers. We're just specializing them differently. So I always find it fascinating whenever people think that VR might be something more dedicated to just games, or that we only need to look into for that kind of software, when really virtual reality and software can be anything you want it to. A video game as a commodity has just as much in common with my calculator app as it does with something like an NES cartridge. So really, I'm finding it fascinating that we're not trying to explore these kind of horizons a little bit more, and that people aren't looking at how much potential VR can have for exploring new types of artistic engagement beyond just simple interactions. I mean, I believe, honestly, that VR is going to completely revolutionize the way we film and create stories as well. So it's just going to be fascinating to see what happens when people start to really explore and broaden the horizons of what we imagine when we think the words VR. So yeah, there were these 3 little demos here. I kind of watched a little bit of each one, but honestly I prefer to watch them in VR for now, and I don't really want to turn on my Rift for this just yet. So I'll report back in on that later on if I ever do get around to it. But anyhow, let's move on to the next article. Again, with the whole VR animation and filmmaking standpoint, Dreamworks provided some 5 insights on their opinions for how virtual reality can be implemented into, well, filmmaking in some degree, since that's what they kind of do. And let's have a look here at the first one. Develop for the medium. Guys, this feels a little... Actually, I have to say for almost all of these points they're really broad, but develop for the medium is kind of obvious, guys. Generally, whenever you find with most hardware or platforms, you'll find that hardware or games or software that are developed specifically for that platform tend to be the very best, per se. I'm not saying that as an objective fact. A third-party item can certainly be someone's favorite on a platform, but it is general. In most cases, it tends to be the first-party exclusive items or the things that are developed specifically for a platform that make the best use of it. It's kind of for that reason that whenever you think of touchscreens or mobile gaming, a lot of people tend to cringe, but that's because for the most part with mobile, we associate that with touchscreens. And touchscreens don't really translate very well to the type of software that a lot of people like to consider hardcore. So the idea that somebody would consider mobile a hardcore platform when it can't play our supposedly hardcore games is rather ludicrous in some people's ideas. Although the reality is, I believe that the mobile platform has just as much versatility as any other. It just kind of happens that its touch or its method of control just doesn't allow the type of versatility in a comforting or kinesthetically pleasing fashion that we're accustomed to with things like game pads and mouse and keyboards and other such things. So it's just kind of interesting that they just had to mention that point, since honestly I think it should be obvious. I mean, VR is one of those mediums where if you don't develop for it specifically for it, it's probably gonna make you sick or not do much for you at all. I mean, you can watch a 2D video in VR, it's just gonna be like watching it on a monitor. And right now, with current VR levels, I think we might need to upgrade the pixel fill before we start trying to replace our desktops with that. Anyhow, for the second bit right here, real-world phobias may translate into VR. Oh, goodness, yes. Guys, as has been stated frequently, VR is a new level of immersion that you just don't get out of other mediums. So whenever you see something in VR, it has the similar scale, level of detail, and impression on you that it can have as it would in real life. I recall specifically there was one article here on Road to VR, I believe, whereby they were discussing the Crescent Bay demo, and that was this alien that would be waving their hand at the person who was in the demo, and the person described that they instinctively just waved back at the alien without really thinking about it like you would do with a regular person. It goes to show in some degree that when you are in VR, your more natural real-world instincts tend to try to port themselves into the virtual environment as well. Another place where I can find that is with my own personal experiences and my family's experiences with whatchamacallit, pardon the remembrance, but it's the Tuscany demo within the Oculus Rift. Effectively, my parents particularly noted that whenever they were walking towards the balcony or towards the ocean shore, they could actually feel as though they were going to fall into the water, and they were actually genuinely stunned by that feeling. And as particular, my mom also noted that when she was going down the stairs, she felt as though she was very close to tumbling downwards due to the speed at which I did it. I held down the shift key. But anyhow, it just goes to show that a lot of things that you would normally not think about with current software is going to have to be taken into consideration when you're doing VR. If you have arachnophobia, do not, and I repeat, do not play Don't Let Go. Seriously, don't. Just don't. That'd be cruel. Anyhow, VR is a new medium. Moving onwards. And start prototyping. Yeah, that's kind of the thing that almost everyone's doing right now, and it's one of the interesting things, because right now, guys, a lot of people tend to think there are two stances generally with VR right now. A lot of people just aren't necessarily buying into it just yet. Many people think or don't understand how just looking at a 3D display in front of you using head tracking would really be all that immersive, but it really is significantly more immersive than anything we've had before. So it's understandable that on some perspectives people would be a little bit more skeptical, and there's also the fact that there are those of us who are very enthusiastic, but at the same time, even for us enthusiasts, there isn't exactly all that much to do in VR if you aren't a developer. It's often because of this that Oculus themselves have said, if you aren't a developer, do not buy the DK2. It's because if you aren't a developer, you're not really going to have all that much to do, except try out the experiments that other developers have done. And honestly, I don't really think you can get much out of those unless you're, well, a developer yourself and want to figure out how somebody did something or how you can try something out. So, truth be told, right now we're basically at a prototyping stage, and every single little thing we figure out right now, guys, is basically going to be a new discovery. It's kind of like the whole PC market again, or the dawn of computers again, because everyone's trying to figure out the rules since we have no idea what's going on. Like, oh, we can't really make things go too fast, otherwise you get motion sick, or oh, you can't do these particular type of motions, or there's ghosting if you put the background in certain fashions, or oh, the uncanny valley effect can be really, really prominent if you place these kinds of models. So it's like everyone's trying to figure things out. So I suppose the best shot we have at figuring things out is just to basically carpet bomb the situation and try out everything. So it's going to be interesting to see how people continue to experiment with that. And finally, the business of VR. Honestly, VR is just too... It's kind of a tricky thing, because I'm always concerned about whether or not VR is going to catch on quickly enough, because we've had in the past, guys, during the 90s, VR having a bit of a prominence, or the people expecting that it was going to be the next big thing, but during the 90s it kind of fizzled out since the technology wasn't there yet, and I personally think right now it is almost there. It's like we're just like right on the border. We just need a few little bits before we can finally just say, okay, the VR master race is coming now. But yeah, I think that the mention that they're making here with Gear VR's launch, yeah, guys, I am paying a lot of attention to what happens with Gear VR right now, because they're basically going to be the vast majority of people's first VR experience, since Samsung's effectively being the first big company that's going to be releasing a mass market VR product at a consumer level. I mean, all the things you've had before from Oculus are dev kits, and things like Google Cardboard are kind of enthusiast or hobbyist items. So this is going to be really VR's first spot in the limelight to see how people react to it. And honestly, I'm a little nervous since it is technically a mobile VR experience that a lot of people are going to be getting, but considering the amount of effort that John Carmack and his team are putting into making sure that the Gear VR pulls off everything it can to demonstrate to people how good current VR can be, I'm both optimistic and very concerned. So I'm just kind of hoping for the best here. As I said, guys, I didn't really cover anything too good, although there is one more little thing I think I want to note here. Yeah, with this next little bit, it mentions that Palmer Luckey won an award for technology. He's kind of been getting a few of these ever since he released the Oculus Rift, but there's actually one point I kind of want to take to mention to everybody in this regard, and that is that, guys, VR, as I said, is basically the next computer boom, or the next internet boom. It's the next .com boom, I'll just put it. So effectively, every single little discovery or change or movement that you make can be significant in some capacity. It'll be amazing. It's effectively saying that we're back to the stage of exploration in software when it comes to VR. So everyone has an opportunity to make their own mark on the industry right now. Palmer Luckey himself basically started off with a Kickstarter asking for $250,000. He got $2.5 million instead, and now he is basically the owner or founder of a company that was purchased by Facebook for $2 billion. Guys, I honestly believe that there's probably going to be a few more Palmer Luckeys coming around that are going to get a lot of money from doing good things inside of virtual reality. So that's part of the reason why I myself and a lot of other people are taking our chances inside of virtual reality at such an early state, because whoever gets in on the ground level is going to be there as it steadily starts rising, and you aren't going to have to climb up since you weren't there afterwards if you decided to just, VR doesn't look all that positive. Good luck climbing up before everybody who has a ground floor level. And it's because of that I just have to say it to everybody out there, if you want to take a chance on VR, just be aware that it is a huge risk, but at the same time, that risk can have a very big reward, as we can see with Palmer Luckey's case. So just another note there. And STEM, this is another little thing here that just made a demo. For those of you that don't know who STEM is, they're basically the guys that were behind the Razer Hydra. They've decided to advance their technology and create their own new controller input for the items, and it's lately been adopted heavily for virtual reality. The Hydra itself has become kind of a bit of a almost necessary peripheral for a lot of VR enthusiasts, since it's a really good motion controller, which, while having a bit of latency, is steadily being improved and used very efficiently, and STEM should be the next big step in improving that. Although I think the last time I checked them out, their pricing structure kind of scared me off a little bit. But yeah, they just created a new ping pong demo. Although I'm also more interested in the fact that a lot of people have been hanging on to the leap, but yeah, hopefully that doesn't go too far. Anyhow, guys, this is a very big bit of news, guys. Grand Theft Auto 5! Yep. First in line to give it to consumers, guys. For those of you that don't know, Grand Theft Auto 5 is getting a re-release for the next-gen platforms, PS4, Xbox One, and PC. And, yeah, they added a new feature this time. They've allowed you to change the perspective from third person to first person. And the moment I heard they were going to do that, I immediately thought VR. Because that's the thing, guys. A lot of people heard about... oftentimes when people think VR and Oculus Rift, a lot of people say, oh, I want to try out Skyrim. Well, the next best thing here is Grand Theft Auto, and I believe that Grand Theft Auto might be able to map itself even better, especially since right now, with this little bit of news that Rockstar is stating that they themselves are going to be working on this. That is huge, because it means that we're going to have a game that is basically guaranteed to be a huge hit, come to the PC market where it can be modified, applied to the highest end virtual reality possible, and take the best advantage of the new perspective. Since one of the things I heard a lot of reviewers note about Grand Theft Auto's first-person perspective is that while there were some segments they enjoyed playing, such as indoor corridors or certain shooting items, they didn't particularly enjoy a lot of them the cars segments, since they found that it was difficult to drive. So this is one area where virtual reality has an advantage, since on a regular controller, if you turn the right stick around, it's kind of like making a significant movement. Now you just need to turn your head. In some respects, one could say that the Oculus Rift, in conjunction with a dual analog or a mouse and keyboard, is effectively a third axis for movement. And that's probably one of the big innovations of the Oculus Rift that's kind of been a little bit undermined by the actual VR aspect of it, or the immersion level of it at the very least. So yeah, in terms of actual like performance and just having this title receive VR support, that's probably enough to get me to buy it. I mean, guys, I don't really buy games as often as I used to. I mean, really don't buy them as often as I used to. It's probably been years since I last bought one directly, but yeah, that's probably enough to get me to buy a game right now. VR and Grand Theft Auto. Although at the same time, I don't know if you guys have also heard about this, but there's been some slight controversy about the first-person perspective. So some people feel that the new perspective kind of elevates Grand Theft Auto's already rather violent content and almost brings it a little bit too close to the real-world violence level. So some people are being genuinely disturbed by it. So I can only imagine if you're being disturbed by that, what will VR do to that? I mean, this might be one of those cases where people are where the ESRB or the active curation of VR content is going to be different as compared to regular software, since honestly, it really takes something that you normally wouldn't consider all that significant and elevates it. I have seen a rock in VR and found it magnificent, so what would seeing murder and torture in VR do for my psyche? Great. I'm already getting some premonitions of the whole VR legal battle. Come on, guys, we all know how it's going to end up. VR is ruining our kids, or VR is making our kids violent. Except the sad thing is, in this case, they might have a point. Speaking of kids, what is this image we can see right here? Yep, that is Cartman. Yeah, last week, South Park decided to do a bit on the Oculus Rift, or virtual reality as a whole in some respects. And they were using the Oculus Rift as a premise behind the idea that Cartman got the Oculus Rift, or Butters. It's kind of confusing in the whole situation, but effectively they're just making a riff on Total Recall. I kind of did my impressions of this over on the blog, but yeah, just to sum it up more or less, I decided to do a quick and little interesting bit using customer service, the Oculus Rift, and what was that movie's name? Total Recall, as a bit of a joke with a bit of Inception thrown in here and there. Kind of interesting, although at the same time I didn't really laugh all that much, since actually I don't really know. Maybe it's because I hate customer service items, or maybe it's because the Oculus Rift is kind of a little close to home, but I don't know. It's just kind of a little bit of an interesting episode, and it's a very good test for your VR knowledge for those of you out there that want to test out your VR knowledgeability. Moving on, this is rather interesting. I think I might have mentioned it earlier or in some comments before, but Google has actually purchased a a company called Magic Leap, which is developing an augmented reality device that, based on the video footage that they've shown, should supposedly have some incredible fidelity. I mean, here we can see a small elephant being carried around, and the thing I find amazing, if this is an accurate descriptor or an accurate idea of what it should look like, is just the sheer quality of it, because the footage itself showed the elephant was very well animated, it seemed at a very high frame rate, and that it was receiving, as you can see here in the image, there's some light bouncing. It appears to be obtaining the light from the real world in some degree, since you can see that it's getting highlights in the direction that the sun appears to be at, and you can also kind of see that it has some, it's getting some light from the sky itself, from I believe it's called ambient lighting, I believe, or something like that, and GI, so it's just kind of fascinating to think that if it really does have the degree of fidelity, I'm really curious as to how much of your FOV it actually takes up, because that could be a very big contender for virtual reality, or at the very least, for the sister technology to go along with the Oculus Rift's huge leap in virtual reality. Because guys, oftentimes you'll hear virtual reality and augmented reality be mentioned together, because I think in some degrees they're kind of sister technologies. The primary difference being that augmented reality is in some respects a version of virtual reality that is, instead of using a completely virtual world, is merely changing the real one to a degree that is more suitable to our entertainment needs, or whatever other needs we may have. So it just kind of makes me wonder exactly how this kind of technology is going to apply together with VR, because honestly I wasn't expecting it to reach this degree of quality just yet, since all I really heard on that degree was a few people sticking some cameras onto Oculus Rifts and other people trying to work harder on the Google Glass, which quite honestly just seems to be kind of flailing due to the high price tag and small market availability. But anyhow, it just seems rather interesting, and I'm just very curious as to how Google's going to handle this and release, since it appears that they're preparing a pretty big event and even have Brian Cox over here as a presenter for this whole situation. And for those of you that don't know who Brian Cox is, he is a theoretical physicist, I believe, or some kind of scientist who is very prominent with some of his work. I've seen him in quite a few documentaries and a bunch of other coverage, and he's kind of a small bit of a big deal, kind of on the level, I'd say, of maybe slightly smaller than Neil deGrasse Tyson and Michio Kaku. So it's just kind of interesting to see that he himself is advocating for this tech, and I can't wait to see what Google has to show in that regard. Well then everyone, here's the last little bit here. It appears that somebody's going to be conducting an artistic experiment whereby they're going to spend an entire month inside of virtual reality. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised. Apparently they're going to be receiving some assistance for some of the smaller, more important details, kind of like eating and using the bathroom, but aside from that, they're going to spend the vast majority of their time within virtual reality. This is pretty interesting, since even though they're calling it an artistic experiment, this does in some cases, in some degrees, have a degree of scientific relevance, since really, it's going to show us exactly how being in virtual reality and having that sense of presence so much for a long period of time can affect our psyche. Since the last demo I heard that was relatively artistic in nature that actually might bear some scientific relevance was the one involving human gender switching. So they placed a male and a female using virtual reality or HMDs in a room, and they had them mirror their own actions. And it resulted in a very strong sense of empathy, whereby the people could effectively feel what it was like to be that other person in a physiological level. So I'm curious what kind of psychological and physiological effects are going to happen for this guy in virtual reality, since the truth is, I don't think anybody's ever tried being in VR that much. I think the longest time I've ever spent inside of the Oculus Rift maybe 4 or 5 hours of just plain old trying out some VR demos, but even then I kind of went in and out a little bit, and kind of end up very tired and exhausted and just plain old exhilarated at the end of the whole experience, since VR can be pretty awesome, guys. Superman. But anyhow, it's just going to be very interesting to see how he reacts, and I'm kind of surprised that he went with the DK1, as we can see here, since, yeah, my DK2 doesn't have exactly the greatest situation with the screen door effect, and I can only imagine how much worse it must be on the DK1, so yeah, dude, it probably would have been a little better if you just got a DK2 real quick. But, hey, it's just going to be some interesting things to check out right there. Well then everyone, that just about does it for this week's virtual reality news segment. Do remember that the website we were covering this week is road2vr.com, so do be sure to check out the links down below in order to check out Road2VR, or look it up over on Google since they're a very great virtual reality website, and I probably wouldn't be able to do these videos without them. Do remember to rate, comment, share, and subscribe in order to keep up with all the VR content I'm going to be producing for this channel. And if you'd like to keep up with more of my activities, do check me out over on Twitter or down below on my blog, since that's the places where I tend to update the most of my activities on. Well then everyone, thank you very much for your time. This has been Marcus Dahl, logging out.